Hey guys, this is Pete with Leisure Time with another episode of What's Wrong With My Hot Tub. Now the customer said that they thought the light lens was leaking on the inside of the tub. When I got here and opened it up, it was almost completely drained, which tells me there's probably something more than just a light lens leaking. So we'll take a look inside here and get a look at what's going on around the light lens. Looks like it is dripping. I think maybe the customer had tried to go in there and repair that themselves. As far as any other leak is concerned, it's hard to tell because the tub is completely empty. We're also looking at frozen lines because the customer didn't put any heat to it. The customer is responsible for keeping the tub from freezing. Frozen lines and stuff like that aren't covered under warranty. We will do what we can today. We'll stick a space heater in here and try to get it warmed up and try to get it heating again, but we'll do one thing at a time. So when looking at the light lens, first thing that we'll want to do is remove the decorative ring that goes around the outside of the light lens. Normally that decorative ring should be just hand tight, but I think because stuff is a little frozen, it's a little harder to get that off, so I have a pair of very large channel locks I'm going to try and get some grip onto. This could be harder than I thought. Okay, so now that we got that off, we'll just kind of do a visual inspection here. We'll take the lens off next. There are two flat notches on the lens that should help a little bit with removing it. However, when we looked on the inside, it seemed as though the customer had put some sort of epoxy putty on it to try to stop the leaking. I don't really like drilling holes in the lens if I don't have to, but it seems like this is one of those situations. Stick a pair of pliers into the holes and then use that as your... Oh, that's on there real good. Okay. So just trying to get an idea of what may have failed there. We're going to inspect the O-ring. This is just a silicone O-ring, and when I take it off I just give it a stretch. Typically these things start breaking down, and when I stretch it out like that it just snaps in half. But this one actually is looking pretty good. So now we want to start inspecting the housing on the spa side of it. On this ring here we're looking for any cracks that are going to be in the housing, and I'm not seeing any. We're going to try and clean off that gunk that the customer put on there. Now it's weird that that was leaking because I'm not seeing any signs of why it would be leaking. Other than what I have seen in the past is that light lens on the other side can sometimes work its way loose, especially with temperature changing. If they happen to drain and fill their hot tub in the winter time, you're now taking away the hot water and then putting back in cold water. Sometimes vibrations from the pump. Just over time that light lens will work itself loose. It'll kind of unscrew and that can cause leaking. But instead of trying to tighten that back down again, looks like the customer just took some epoxy putty and put it in there. So now that that's cleaned up, we can try putting a new light lens on because we had to drill holes in that other one to try to get it off. So the new light lens does come with a new silicone O-ring. I was originally just going to replace the O-ring with a replacement one that I brought, but because of circumstances, having to drill the holes in there to get that off, and we're just going to replace the entire light lens. I don't have a new decorative ring to put on, but I can come back at another day with that new decorative ring. I'm going to set that on there, and just as an extra precaution, I'm going to use some clear silicone sealant and run that right around the O-ring as sort of just extra help. Don't need very much, it's just a small bead. And that should be all you need to tighten it. You really shouldn't have to put any kind of a wrench on it to tighten it down. We're gonna go ahead and start putting water back into it. Even though the lines are frozen, we're gonna wanna keep water in it, and we'll put a space heater down in that equipment area to thaw out those lines. But for now, we want to be able to test that light lens to see if it's leaking or not. Anytime I go to fill a tub back up again, I always put the water into the standpipe that is for the circulation pump. And that you can tell is the circulation pump because it's a gray cap as opposed to the other 4 white caps. This one filter pulls, the circulation pump pulls water directly through that one and that one alone. So it's important to always clean your filters and rotate them. That way this one filter doesn't always get the brunt of the constant cleaning, because with these ones the circulation pump never shuts off even when the tub is up to temperature. It continues moving water. We're going to put a space heater in there while the tub is filling up to try and thaw out some of these lines. If you don't have a small space heater, even a hair dryer would be enough to warm up the air that's inside of there. Obviously, once we put the heater in there, then we're going to put a panel back on, just trying to contain that heat. So since the location that I put it in is right next to this plumbing line here, I am going to turn it back down to the lower 750 watt setting. That way it's not getting super hot, but it is enough heat that will warm it up in there. Just like that, and we'll let it fill up with water, warm up in there, keep our fingers crossed, see if we can get this taken care of. We'll come back, the water level's pretty full now. We could probably keep going a couple more inches, but it is full enough to check things out. Looking down here at the bottom, looks like we've got quite a bit of water running out. That's probably the other leak that we were thinking was going on. Hopefully that also means that the plumbing lines have thawed out, and it will show us where the leak is. Oh yeah. So a pretty common issue with these heaters, and I think Hot Springs purposefully builds them this way. When something happens and it freezes, this end cap here will sort of burst. That's where your leak comes from, but they do that because you can actually order replacement parts, O-rings, and this end cap for a lot cheaper than it is to replace the entire heater. So because that frozen broke, unfortunately that's not under warranty, so we will be replacing that. Looking at the light lens that we replaced, I don't see anything dripping from there. I also like to just run my finger along. It's not wet. We should be good to go here. So like I said, we'll get the heater taken care of. There's a little tag and it tells you 240 volt 4 kW, 4 kilowatt. So that's how big the heater is. That's what we're going to want to replace it with. So I got the new heater to replace it with. I've got a heat gun, which is a very handy tool to use, especially in colder climates, but it's still nice to have with older hot tubs because that vinyl tubing over time starts to sort of break down, and the first process of it breaking down is it becomes very stiff and not very pliable to use. So we're going to use the heat gun to warm it up. We're going to clamp off the vinyl tube, and that way we don't have to completely drain the whole hot tub again. About time for a new heat gun. Just need to clamp off the inlet and the outlet of the heater. Keep your heat gun a couple inches away from the tube, that way you don't get too hot and end up melting the tube. We just want that warm enough that it makes it a little easier to clamp onto. Our sensors from the heater. So on the back of the heater it has this bleeder line, so we are going to get a little bit of water still flowing a bit, but it's not enough to cause any issues because it was already leaking quite a bit out the other side. And that one I'm just going to pop off the back. I'll let that drain for a minute. Okay, now that we've disconnected our plumbing, we will have to unplug power into the circuit board. So the big thick wire that's coming from heater comes straight up into here, into the circuit board. And the best way of removing that is take the flat blade screwdriver, just shove it right up into there, and the wire slides right out. And then we need to remove the holder device here. You have to squeeze that together, it'll drop down. And now the ground wire is on that lug. There's a bonding wire on the end of the heater right here. There were 3 wires coming off of the heater. At the end you have your temperature sensor, the high limit sensor, and then there's this one coming out the back. It goes up into the circuit board, and that is going to be our flow switch sensor. I'm just going to unplug that one. And now the heater's completely out. So Hot Springs provides 2 different types of heaters for replacements on the hot tub. There's the OEM one, which is basically the exact same heater that was put in at the factory, and then they have, it's not really called an aftermarket one, but it's just not the same one that they use at the factory. You have this wire coming off, and there's a pressure switch in there that when water's moving through, it closes the pressure switch, sends that back to the circuit board saying water is moving, it's okay to turn on, it's safe. What they've done is gotten rid of that pressure switch and instead put in a snap disc, which is sort of your backup safety mechanism. So if the heater gets too hot and overheats, not only do you have the high limit sensor here, but you also have snap disc on the inside here, which will cut power to the heater so that your tub doesn't overheat. What they have instructed us to do is if you put in this heater, all we need to do is put in a jumper on the circuit board. And the way to make that jumper, I mean, you can order, they have a part number for it, but there's an easy way just to make the jumper. I'll show you how to do that once we get this put back in. The other thing we have to do is, the new one compared to the old one is they have moved the lug to where the bonding cable goes. So on this one the lug is down here on the end, but on the new one it's way over here, and so our bonding wire isn't long enough. So we just have to unscrew this from here, move it back over here, screw it back down again. So the only difference between the 2 screws is that first one I took off is going to be slightly longer than the other one, so I want to make sure I use that slightly longer one down here where I'm screwing that back down again. I'm going to use the shorter one over here. Very lightly, I don't need to really torque that down. Okay, so now we have the room that we need to hook the bonding cable back up again. I'll have to put the heater exactly back where it was before, but just kind of in the general vicinity. Hook that back up. Pay attention to what your inlet and your outlets were. I have seen where customers do it themselves and they swap those lines and then it's not heating right and there's a flow issue and all kinds of other problems. Again, we're going to use the heat gun to kind of warm up that tubing so it slides back on there a lot easier. Only takes about 10-15 seconds with the heat gun to warm that up. Because it's cold outside, that vinyl tubing has gotten cold and shrunk. It's a little harder to get back on, but like I said, we warm it up there. Next thing we want to do is screw our temperature sensors back in there. Now you can look at the old gaskets, O-rings, and just kind of check out if they're still any good. This tub isn't that old, so really they should be okay. You could reuse them again. However, with the new heater, they do give you a brand new set of O-rings, so we might as well use the brand new set of O-rings. You notice you have a big one and a small one. That's going to coordinate with whatever the sensor is. And if you look at the sensors, they purposefully did two separate thread pitches. One is bigger and one is smaller, so that you didn't put them in the wrong spot. They will only screw into one place. And you can look at the holes. On our control side, the inlet side, our hole is a little bit bigger. That means we use the bigger thread and the bigger O-ring. Of course, we have the smaller sensor with the smaller O-ring, the smaller hole. Once you got those in there finger tight, then you can come back with a pair of pliers. And there's no need to really wrench down on that. I'm only snugging it up. As soon as you feel some resistance, then it's good to go. When I first started, I over-tightened those and they snap right off. So you kind of got to get a feel for the resistance on them. Slide our hose clamps back on. Now that we got all of our plumbing lines hooked back up again, you can disconnect the hose clamps. Now when the water's cold like that, then it's going to be pinched like that for a little bit until that water would warm back up. But with it pinched like that, we're still restricting the flow of water. So I'm going to take the heat gun back to it again and get it to relax back to its normal form. Okay. We'll plug our bonding wire back in. Now someone might ask, what's the purpose of the bonding wire? And it's a way to ground the component. Even though each component has its own ground wire, the green one, it's going to be grounded. The bonding wire, you can see, is this really thick copper wiring. And the purpose for that is basically for high voltage things like lightning strikes. Typically you're not going to get a surge of power coming through your incoming power lines from the disconnect box, but this is more for like if the lightning strikes close to the tub, then it needs somewhere to go, and so you have these larger bonding wires or grounding wires that will help with that and theoretically save the component from being damaged from lightning. Although, you know, lightning is so unpredictable, you never know how much voltage is really going through that and how much damage could actually happen. By code, things are supposed to be bonded like that. So the next thing we're going to do is plug in our power again. You can see our connections here. This is what they give you from the factory, but we don't have any of those tabs to plug back into the circuit board, so the easiest way is to just clip those off, and we're going to strip the wire back so we have it exposed. Now on the original heater wire, it had this eyelet connector on the ground. I don't have another eyelet to replace that with, so we're going to do something different. We're going to strip our wires back here about a ½ an inch or so. Somebody might ask, does it matter where the black or the white wire go on the circuit board? And the answer is it does not, because the heater is not polarized, so it doesn't matter. The voltage is still going to flow through there the same way. Also with the ground wire, it doesn't matter where it's grounded as long as it's grounded. Ground is ground the world around, so if it's a ground lug, then it's going to work. So anywhere on the circuit board, this is a ground lug, this is a ground lug, this one, this one, this one, this one, And then right here's a bunch of grounding. So anywhere on those positions, if you can make it work, then that will work. I have noticed the easiest way for me to do that, especially when I don't have the eyelet to put back onto there, is I'm just gonna end up screwing into one of these ones because it's easily accessible. Loosen up that lug. Okay. I always give it a little tug just to make sure it's on there tight. Now we'll run these wires back up into here. Just pay attention to where it's labeled on the block. So H1, H2 is where your heater plugs into. Same thing, shove the flathead screwdriver up into there. Put your wire up, give it a tug to make sure it's in there tight. Now onto the pressure switch bypass plug. So there's a couple of ways of doing it. You can use one of these things here, and as long as you're sliding that onto the little studs, it will bypass the flow switch. So looking at the original, you got the two wires on this end. That's what closes the switch, so it would be taking that and covering up those two. There we go. So that could do it right there. Another way, especially if you don't have to send this back for warranty, then you can just take the plug off of here. And then we're gonna strip the end of the wires. And then you splice those two wires together. That creates the bypass. There is a part number that you can order this bypass plug from Hot Springs, but that's the fastest and easiest way of doing it. So I'm going to take that, plug it back in on there. So now let's turn on the tub. We'll make sure it's heating, doing everything it's supposed to. So because the heater is a 4 kilowatt, it's the smaller heater. Inside our disconnect box, we have two breakers. We have a 30 amp and a 20 amp, and the smaller heater is going to run off of the smaller breaker. And so what we want to do is turn on our pumps in the system first, make sure we have water flowing. Typically we should see some movement coming up out of the bottom there. It is possible though that the line from here to there is still frozen. You can hear the circulation pump initially get turned on for a minute, and now it's stopped. It will do this about 4 times. There it goes again. There's also an air bubble that's moving through the line. You can see this air bubble right here. What we got to do is purge that air bubble out, and that may be part of the reason why we're not getting any flow over there. Easiest way to purge that out is just pull the line off the circulation pump right here. So you heard it try one more time. Oh, and it was able to purge the air out by itself. That air pocket pushed up out through there. We should have good flow now. I'm not going to worry about pulling that line off to purge it out because it should be good to go. So what I did here is just label each breaker. These are pumps for the 30 amp. The heater just runs off the 20 amp. Now that we got good flow in the tub, we're gonna turn the heater on. The purpose of doing that is if you send power to the heater and there's like an air pocket in the lines and the circulation pump tries to push that air pocket through, your heater is just going to get really hot really fast. And that's why there's both the snap disc in the back and also the high limit sensor, and it does that. Then you're gonna get some weird errors on your top side saying protection mode, and it'll be a big long digit error code along the bottom of the screen. Normally I can read that error code and it'll tell me what had happened. A lot of times what it is the heater is overheating. But like I said, now that we have good flow, turn on the power to the heater. I'm going to take my amp clamp, just put it right onto either the black or the white wire, doesn't matter. That's going to tell me I got 16.8 amps coming through the heater, which is great. That's what we're looking for. In a 4 kilowatt heater, you should have anywhere between 12 to 17 amps coming through there. On a larger heater like a 6 kilowatt, you should get about 22 to 27 amps. That's what you're looking for. So really any amp draw is what you're looking for on the heater. So we're all good to go there. And then I like to just test everything else out. So it's going to show us our current water temperature. I just want to make sure it's set up to about 90 degrees. That's probably what the customer wants. And then we're going to turn on our jets just to make sure that we want to purge all the air out of the jets. Got some good water movement there. Make sure high speed's working good too. Turn that off. Pump number 1, we're going to check that. There it goes. Sometimes it takes the pumps a few minutes to purge the air out. If it doesn't do it right away, like it did, what I like to do is turn it off. You'll maybe get an air bubble burp out of the lines and then turn it back on again. And I'll do that. I'll turn the pumps on and off a few times until we got good water flow like we're seeing there. But everything's looking good.
Thank you so much for watching this video. Make sure to like, comment, and subscribe down below for future content from Leisure Time Inc.